and we are live with our 25th episode of Absolute AppSec. I am Ken Johnson at CK Tricky. I remembered to mute the video this time. Thank you very much to my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter.
Hey everybody, welcome once again. Happy Pioneer or Pie and Beer Day, depending on your take if you're in Utah. So
Pie and beer sounds delicious.
yes it is. I guess, right?
Well, yeah, of course it is. Well, pie certainly is. I'm not a big beer fan. So today we're joined by Scott Piper. Scott, say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Scott is we were just talking about this before we started. He's got 6 AWS certifications. So that's amazing. Like, first of all, like hats off to you for 6 AWS certifications, 2 of which are professional level. And I know those aren't easy to obtain. Like, that's crazy awesome. So hats off to
you. Thank you.
Speaking of which, Scott, I mean, I know we're going to get into origin story and things like that right now, but speaking of those 6 certifications, on average, how long does it take you to get through a certification, and how long did it take you to get all of those?
Yeah, so I mean, I imagine we'll get into some of my history, but basically I decided to start up a consulting firm. And then in doing that, before I had any clients or anything, I had downtime. So started, trying to take all the different certifications. So, I mean, I basically was studying for those full time. So within a period of a few weeks, I got the initial 5 certifications. So 3 associate level and then 2 professional level. Did that, had some clients and everything, and then got the security specialization. But I would say all in all, it's probably about a week, pretty full time, I guess, studying for them. Some of the associate levels though, I took them back to back, one on a Monday and the other on a Tuesday, so because a lot of them is really similar, especially for the initial 5, the associate and professional level certifications. Once you take one of them, about 80% of the material to take the next one. And they're all very similar. So but the security specialization was the most different of all of them. That's the one where you really took, in looking at the questions, I could tell I was in the security specialization. Whereas for the other certs, if you just showed me a random question from them, I couldn't tell you which of the certifications it was for.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know we get questions all the time about people getting into the industry, and we'll dig into your background here shortly. But some certifications, some of us have done the OSCP on the penetration testing side, and that's an all-out intense months of work to actually get through. So it doesn't surprise me that AWS isn't quite as technical as that, right? Or quite as intense, because they do want to push people to get those certifications. So I just wondered, since we were talking about the certs already, what that was. Now I know, Ken, you were going to kind of introduce Scott some more, so I jumped in there. So go ahead.
No. I mean, I probably should we should give everyone a little bit of a background on Scott. So Scott obviously knows a lot about AWS security as well. So basically, Scott runs Summit Route. That's his business. He is primarily an AWS security consultant. And if I'm wrong, definitely feel free to correct me. I know you also. So there's a few projects that Scott's built. One was flaws.cloud, which is pretty awesome. It's like an interactive kind of gamified kind of learning to hack on AWS. So it's pretty cool. You should definitely check it out. He's built Cloud Mapper, which is a visualization tool for AWS. So both Cloud Mapper and Cloud Tracker are under the Duo Labs, which Scott will explain and get into. They're under the Duo Labs GitHub organization. And Scott's done speaking, Hack West, besides SLC. So I guess when it comes to asking AWS questions and security, this would be the time and the place to do it. So, but thank you, Scott, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess the first thing that we typically get into is how did you get into InfoSec? What was your path to InfoSec? You know, because it's so weird. Some people like sometimes they, you know, they liked programming and then they got their first job and then they kind of like found some SQL injection and that started their path. Or somebody was doing, you know, networking and somehow, you know, decided that they wanted to switch over to AppSec or, you know, whatever the case is. So there's always a different path that people take.
Yeah. So my path was probably more direct and like earlier than a lot of people's. Like for me, it was actually 6th grade. I remember I decided I was going to get into like computer programming, decided to do game programming, decided that games weren't really like it wasn't going to work for me making games. And so decided to get into security because this was like 1995, like the movie Hackers had come out. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Like, so it was very early on, like very focused. And so, I mean, I remember back in the day, like reading Information Warfare by Win Schwartau and just like other books from way back then. And from there, like I had the plan of like, I'm going to work at the NSA. That's like the best place to do security, like was my assumption as a child, which how on earth did I even know that the NSA like existed, you know, or like that was, you know, a path, but that was the plan. And so it was basically just like, how can I get there? And so went to college and started off at Georgia Tech, which they were supposed to have this thing called the Cyber Core Scholarship, which was going to basically enable me to go work at the NSA. When I got there, though, they ended up not having the funding for it. And so like I was supposed to be one of the first people in it. They didn't get the funding. And so I was like, okay, what do I do? And so like quickly had to figure out new plans. Heard about this school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which I didn't even know where Tulsa was. I didn't know where Oklahoma was, like none of that, but got on a flight out there and was like, all right, they have the program. So went out there for that. And Georgia Tech eventually did get the Cyber Core Scholarship and everything. They were one of the first people to get it, but Tulsa had it a little bit better than them, for undergraduates at least. So anyways, yeah, so I went out to Tulsa, Oklahoma and studied like computer security things and development, and then went off to the NSA and worked as a developer there for a couple of years.
Oh, I didn't actually realize that you actually ended up doing what you said you're going to do as a kid and you worked at the NSA. I didn't realize that. That's hilarious.
Yep. I mean, so accomplished that plan, and then from there bounced around to a couple of other like different jobs, commercial vendors and things like that. Worked for Norman, the antivirus company in Norway. So I worked in Oslo, Norway for a bit. So not Norton, but Norman. They got bought by Blue Code and I think then got bought by Symantec or something. But anyways, so worked for them, worked for other folks, tried to start my own company, doing basically like a CrowdStrike Falcon type of, you know, essentially like a competitor to them, except I had like no idea what I was doing from a business perspective and like bit off way more than I could chew. Like I was trying to do like application whitelisting plus an EDR plus, you know, like all these other features and everything, and like coded it up. And eventually I dumped it like open source on GitHub once I realized like I was a total failure and like, you know, trying to make that happen. But then from there, so I'd always been doing development and then switched over to join a security team. So I joined a Yelp security team out in San Francisco, did that. My boss there, who's awesome, he kept asking me like, you know, like what can I do to help you progress in your career, you know? And I was like, just let me keep doing what I'm doing. I'm loving this, you know, like this is awesome. But like every week he would ask me that. And so finally, like, I was like, well, I guess I want to be head of security. So like, I guess I want your job. So like, are you going to quit? Like, what do we do here? And so anyways, eventually the opportunity came up for me to become head of security for another company. So I took that opportunity, did that for a bit. And then from there ended up transitioning into this consulting. So done like a lot of different things, primarily focused on like software development. That's kind of like my bread and butter. And then have also worked like on security teams and being like in charge of security. So like I was head of security in the sense that I was the only security person. And so like that gave me a good grasp of just like everything that goes into like the security of a company, because like you get like really siloed, you know, a lot of times depending on what you're doing, and like being that one person that's in charge of like everything, you know, that was like very eye-opening in the sense like I have to take care of, you know, like our badge readers and our surveillance cameras, and you know, like what is our policy for like fire escapes, and you know, everything like that.
So did you have anybody, if you're the only security person, did you have any, were you just like using vendors and consultancies and stuff like that for, or were you,
it was,
you have no,
all me like figuring it out. We were, I don't know, like we didn't have like the funding to, you know, basically acquire, you know, or be able to use other vendors or consultants or anything like that. I think like a lesson learned for myself was also like I should have pushed harder to like actually use them, because I was doing so many things that I know that I was doing almost all of them very poorly, you know, just in the sense like I was stretched so thin, you know, and I'm responsible for everything, you know, like our like surveillance cameras, I think was like a Nest camera, you know, like as I'm just like trying to like figure everything out. I mean, like it worked well enough, you know, for like what our needs were at the time, and like coming in from like going from zero to trying to have something. And we also had the kind of like restriction on us that the I guess executives of the company wanted us to basically practice a lot of the same security practices that a major bank or someone like that would practice, which means that they were very concerned about any time that we were going to, if we were going to send logs to anybody, or we were going to have, you know, like an EDR on our own systems, which was going to be sending logs somewhere, like that was a concern for them. And so I should have pushed more against that though, just because trying to do all those different things on your own is super hard to try and do.
No, you definitely can't. And you might, like the weird thing about that is that if you're a tech, you have this kind of craving to want to, I mean, I don't know if this was the case for you, but I having been in a situation that, you know, it was like do all these things, one person at the time, later more one other, you kind of like are, I mean, I was anyways, I was like, oh, I kind of want to just get my hands on things and I can do it, and those solutions are just snake oil anyways, and you know, like it, you end up just wanting to like, but then it's like you said, you're trying to do everything, you can't do any of it really well. You end up stressed out, working too many hours, burnout, all that fun stuff. So yeah, like if you want,
I mean, that's it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's the danger of, you know, kind of that small company, low budget, right? You know, that you're trying to grow. I mean, you know, Ken and I, you know, went through, you know, a SOC 2, you know, audit, or SOC 1, whatever it was, right? Type 2 audit. And as a small company, and you're like, oh yeah, security cameras, right? We have Nest Cam set up, right? I mean, it's good enough to pass something like that for sure, but physical security requirements are way less, and it's much harder to actually document and follow process because, you know, it's one guy and, you know, he's got the key to the office and could get in and unplug the camera if he wanted to, right? What are you going to do? So
yeah, but it's always painful when people want a Lamborghini, but they want to spend Honda Civic money, you know, like you got to give a good budget. You've got to give a good team. If you want like all of the bells and whistles for protecting if you want bank level, major financial level institution security controls, you're gonna have to pay for it. You know, that's the reality.
It's also hard too, like especially like a lot of those kind of like audits or compliance, like they're really big on having, you know, like separation of privilege, you know, or separation of duties and least privilege. But like when you're a small company and it's like you doing everything, like it's really hard to be able to say that you have any separation of duties, you know, because it's just you doing everything. You have to like, you know, try and coax somebody else in the company to be like, hey, can you be in charge of this thing, you know?
Yeah, just
your
all you got to do is
approval process. Yeah,
once a year you got to sign something. So and just don't say a lot to our QSA.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a rough. That's a rough challenge, but at the same time, it sounds like, and I think anybody that's ever been in that position, you said you learned a lot, and it's absolutely true. Like even if it's something like where, I don't know, you feel like you didn't do wasn't the best results that you could have whatever got, like you still learn something from that experience and you take it with you every place you go, like it's not necessarily a bad thing if things weren't perfect. You've learned like, hey, you can't bite off more than you can chew. Like outsource what you can. So
yeah, I mean, I learned a lot, which helps me now because, when I talk with clients, I'm usually talking with like the head of security. And so like I can, I understand a lot of the other issues that they might have going on, or like every once in a while, when I do work with a client and they go to give me access to something, I'll be able to call out not only things that are specific to like AWS security, but it'd be like, hey, like when I requested this access, like, this person emailed me the passwords and stuff, like you should have a better process in place than, like emailing me those things. And so, I'll be able to mention those types of things in, my, assessment reports or anything like that to them.
Yeah, you know where they're coming from, where their head's at, their needs.
Yep.
You can be a little bit empathetic to those requirements. Excuse me. So now, circling back, now you're doing consulting full time, right? Yep. So you bring all of those lessons learned that you've acquired with you everywhere you go. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions I had were like, when it comes to, we could go in any direction, there's two things I'm interested in. What are the challenges that you see from like a software security perspective, or what challenges do you see from like an AWS security standpoint for, your typical organization? Mm-hmm. If there is such a thing as a typical organization.
Yeah. And I've worked with clients that range from, very small, they have like 5 EC2s, which is the VMs basically that you're running in AWS, to a Fortune like 100 that had, like hundreds of AWS accounts. And so they have, like very, very many number of EC2s, running throughout that, along with using like every other AWS service there. So it's really interesting that like in some ways, some things become easier, in the AWS environment versus on-prem. Like you have access to these APIs that can tell you all the different things that are basically connected to one another, or that your security groups and what things, potentially could talk to one another. And you have APIs to be able to see, what servers exist and things like that, versus the on-prem environment where, you have to chase cables around or something in order to try and figure out those connections. And so it gives you a lot of that additional value, a lot of those like insights, but there's like no tooling for any of these things, which is like kind of interesting. And in AWS themselves, they've provided a ton of APIs and stuff like that, but like they don't sponsor any tooling or anything along those lines. Like even though, I do consulting purely on AWS things, like AWS does not give me, they don't even give me any credits to be able to use like AWS services or anything like that. So myself and a number of other companies have had to build up these different tools. Netflix, for example, has done tons of different AWS security tools. They have Security Monkey, which people are pretty aware of, and they have a number of other like monkey tools, Chaos Monkey and things like that, and then just a whole bunch of other tools. And then Capital One, they have a tool called Cloud Custodian. There's Bridgewater. They're doing a lot of interesting things recently related to like automated reasoning and stuff on things on AWS. So there's all these like companies that are having to build these things themselves. And right now there's not a lot of like vendors out there for AWS things that are doing too many unique things, I would say. Like they're all kind of helping with compliance processes, or helping you check things, but I don't think that they're spending like a lot of R&D dollars or anything like that on actually trying to find new things that can be done with this. And so that's why a lot of companies are having to do those things themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should say that. We went to, Ken and I were both at reInvent a couple of years ago, and that was our big complaint about the security tooling or the security companies that were there. It was all like, oh, we're going to check your compliance, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to look at your S3 buckets. We're going to look at your security policies. and then we're going to tell you X, Y, and Z. But like it didn't really dig into the fundamentals. I mean, I got more, like I definitely get more use out of like the Weird Al tool that Ken and Chris came out with than I did out of some of that stuff that we saw at reInvent. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't good sessions that were there, but some of the most interesting ones that we went to were, to your point, from Cap One, from Netflix, like the guys that are really in the internals and really trying to take that a step further than just, hey, I'm just looking at the YAML that's coming out and then doing a little bit of analysis and then I'm putting it in a pretty dashboard, right?
Yep.
And that kind of brings us to some of those things that you brought up that you wanted to talk about, but I know you're known for, first of all, like Cloud Mapper and Cloud Tracker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those tools that you developed in conjunction with Duo Labs. And maybe we can jump into that a little bit, unless Ken, you had something else that you wanted to.
No, I was curious what the impetus was for building Cloud Mapper and Cloud Tracker. Like, what was the driving force behind it? What made you want to build those tools?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with like the origin story also of like flaws.cloud, which was kind of like the first like big AWS project that I worked on. And so that was actually while I was running as being in charge of security for that company. I built flaws.cloud for like my own DevOps guys to make sure that they were aware of the things that I was most scared of, in the AWS environment. And in building that, I figured, like, hey, I'm releasing this thing, for my own guys. I think I can build it in such a way that I can release it like publicly and hopefully not end up with like a massive AWS bill or anything. And so I was able to release that. And then once I released that, that was when like I started getting questions from people, just like random people that had seen it, being like, hey, can you help me with AWS things? And so from there, that was really when I was like, looks like there's an opportunity to do something with AWS consulting, and kind of my role as, being in charge of security. I felt like I had kind of brought that company as far as I was capable of bringing them at the time. So it was like time for me to wind down from that. And so that's how I got into starting, my own consulting business. But then, yeah, so I started working with Duo Security on some things with them. And, as kind of like that contract was winding down with them, they asked me like, hey, what are your next steps? Like, what do you have a new client lined up? Like, what are you planning on doing? And I was like, I've had some ideas for some tools that I want to build, but, I just haven't had time to. So I think I'm just going to like take a break from any clients. I'm going to focus on building these tools. And Duo was like, you're going to get a new client and you're never going to build those tools. Like you're going to have the opportunity between, like make money, for a new client or do this thing for like free, like that won't ever happen. So they were super cool. And they were also like, we also actually want those tools to exist, like, so how about, like we make an arrangement that, you build them, with us, and that'll give you access to, by building it with Duo, I was able to get, be able to use it in their environments, so use it in a live customer environment as opposed to me trying to stand up my own little, test environments or something like that, and actually talk with like their DevOps guys to be, ask them like, hey, does this map that's being generated from this tool, does this match your understanding of what the environment looks like, and so, and be able to do that across like all their other environments. And so anyways, was able to build it with them, worked out super well. And so that's why it's released under the Duo Labs name. But yeah, and what these different tools are, I should mention, is so there's Cloud Mapper, and so its original purpose was to be able to diagram networks, and so it looks at the EC2s running the environment, it looks at the RDS instances, basically all these different resources, and then it looks at what's called the security groups or firewall rules, and from that it's able to determine what can talk to which other things in the environment, and so then it's able to just draw this out, make a diagram, and be able to show, here's your EC2 instances, these are the subnets and VPCs and regions that they exist in, and then this is the other things that they can talk to, and these are the ones that are publicly exposed from the internet. And so it's able to show all those different things and do it in such a way that like you can it's like a interactive view, so you can like collapse things and expand like different nodes, and so you can play around with it and move things around to match kind of like what you want it to look like, as opposed to just generating a static image like you would do with like a GraphViz or something like that. So that was Cloud Mapper, and then Cloud Tracker is my other tool, which basically helps you do least privilege on AWS. And so what it does is it looks at your IAM policies to understand what are the privileges that you've granted to the different users and roles, and then it looks at the CloudTrail logs to see the API calls that have actually been called, and then it does a diff of those. And so it's able to see, here are the privileges that were granted, here are the privileges that were actually used, and so here are the privileges that you can remove from that user, and it won't impact them because they've never actually used those privileges before. So that those are kind of like what those tools were originally.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I like the whole. So what's funny is when Seth mentioned we went to reInvent, Jason Chan from Netflix talked about, and I've been trying to Google, try to figure out what.
You're probably going to talk about Repo Kid, I'm guessing, is their tool, which is similar to Cloud Tracker.
Well, no. What was it called?
Repo Kid. And then they had another tool called Aardvark that works along with it. And
it wasn't those tools. This was a tool that we had seen I think at reInvent 2017, I want to say, or 2016. I can't remember at this point. But they talked about it, and then I was bugging Jason, like, when's it gonna be released? And then it never got released. As far as I know, it never got released. I mean, this was like a year after he had talked about it. It still hadn't been released, so maybe never. But maybe it was ported into the new tool that you just mentioned, because this was the thing I was trying to get, was like this exact functionality.
Yep.
Like, so it's just cool that you ended up building that, because like I said, we were like, where is this tool? We want it. Like,
yeah, so Netflix had built a similar tool called Repo Kid, which uses this other thing called Aardvark. And basically what it does is, instead of using CloudTrail, it's using Access Advisor, which is another service at AWS. But that doesn't have as fine granularity as the CloudTrail logs does, because Access Advisor will tell you a user used EC2, but it doesn't tell you, like, well, did they use it in the past week, or did they use it like 5 years ago? And it doesn't tell you, like, did they use it to start an EC2 instance or kill an EC2 instance or what? So it doesn't give you that finer granularity. So they had built and released that tool. They also had an internal tool called Repo Man, which they kind of discussed and mentioned a couple times, which did actually use CloudTrail logs, but they never released it. And so
that was the one that I'm thinking of, because I remember, if I remember correctly, it actually revoked permissions as well, and it didn't just alert, but it would like revoke, and then people had to like ask for it back.
Yep. Yeah. So we, like, Netflix and I kind of approach things from different like philosophies. Their view is, they have a massive scale, they have all these people, and all these different services, and they want the ability to just automatically like revoke things, and be able to make those automated remediations to things. Whereas for me, doing consulting, I need to be able to come in and give someone advice and not actually like kill their services and break their business, So we had to have like those differences between the tools. That was kind of like one of the main differences there.
Yeah, breaking stuff is typically not what you want to do as a consultant. It's okay it's possibly more acceptable to do that internally, depending on so many factors. But as a consultant, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, so mine is definitely more of like an interactive tool where like it is not providing you like an automatic report of like, here's the changes you can make. It's more of like, hey, for this user, whenever they assumed into this role, did they make, like what are the privileges that they made use of or not? So it allows you kind of like to ask questions. And so eventually I'll make it more automated and make it like a little bit easier to use, but like that's the current state of things that it exists at right now.
I mean, I have other questions, which we'll get to, and I'm sure Seth has his questions. I have some questions about sort of like what your customers ask for normally and whatnot. But before we get to that, there was a question asked, which was, when you started the consultancy, did you start it with clients or without clients? Like, did you already have like even just one client who
Nope.
Was like, no, you just
I mean, I had those people like asking me like questions for help and things. But really kind of the defining moment for it is after I'd released flaws.cloud, one of the people that asked me questions was someone in a meetup group up in Chicago. And they said like, hey, can you talk at our meetup group about flaws? And I was like, I would love to, but I'm living in Denver right now. And like, so I'm sorry, like I can't go there. And they were like, we'll pay for your flight and hotel. And I was like, oh, so now like it got changed between like this. And I was still like, you know, kind of scared from having previously tried to start a company, which made $0 ever, you know, like I never got a customer check ever. And so like this time around, like I wasn't going to make any money off of this because they're just paying for flight and hotel, you know, but like someone was willing to write me a check for a couple $100, you know, to fly out there and stay there, you know, for the night in order to, you know, deliver this presentation. And so like that was like a defining moment for me of like, okay, someone is willing to pay me money. Like there is a need for this clearly. And like, especially in that case where like I'd never talked about flaws ever, you know, like this was going to be my first like speaking engagement about it in any way, shape or form. And this random person was like willing to, you know, send me money for it. So that was like the big defining factor. And so that was really like, I got very close to the point at which this meetup was going to happen before I decided to resign from my position, because I really realized like, okay, when I go up there and I talk in front of that group, I either have to, you know, go up there and say like, hey, I work at this company and you should, you know, come work for us. Or I go up there and say, hey, I'm starting a consulting business. You should, you know, like hire me to do some work for you. And so that was like what really happened there. And so, you know, ended up resigning and, you know, gave that presentation there and got zero business out of giving that presentation. But anyways, you know, so I did that. And then, yeah, I mean, I basically studied up on those different certifications. And like, while that was happening, I was, you know, basically just kind of sending out emails to people that, you know, I had known from past. And yeah, through that was able to ultimately line up some work.
Seth and I have had this conversation before where, you know, like it's weird because sometimes you'll do a meetup and, well, first of all, sometimes you'll be invited to do a meetup purely because somebody wants to scare the shit out of their developers. Like they want to scare them. Yep. And they, you know, we'll say raise awareness is probably the more PC term, you know, but yeah, they want to scare them. They want to, you know, get them to realize like somebody's showing that somebody's either like built a tool to show exploitation, you know, and proof of concept something out, or, you know, show them that people are, in your case, they are gamifying and showing that like, oh, by the way, yeah, it's a known thing that people are attacking this. And also here's some like different ways that they do it, which is awesome. So sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's, you know, just whatever other thing, but often that's the case. And then the other thing is like, sometimes you'll go there and you can never tell. You'll go to these meetups, you'll do these talks, and then maybe 12 months or 18 months later, sometimes someone will be like, hey, I saw your talk and, you know, could you do some business, you know, could you consult for us? And you're like, wow, that business lead came out of nowhere a year and a half or 2 years later, even sometimes, you know.
It's crazy. I mean, same situation. Like I was just at the AWS Summit up in New York, and so was able to meet with some like current and like potential clients that I'd met in different ways, but like also just tried to like go there and talk with random people and hand out business cards, you know, and do like that hustling, you know, and again, like I don't expect any of the people I gave a business card to ever contact me. You know, they have not. But yeah, you never know. I mean, it's all kind of a gamble to see what happens with it.
Yeah, for sure. So, do you get, when you get pulled into a company, are you doing like any threat modeling? Are they saying, hey, we have some requirements we have to meet with, like encryption and transit at rest, safe backups of this data? Is it something else like, you know, hardening guidelines and automating security into AWS? What are the things that people are usually trying to figure out?
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing that I get called in for is doing like an assessment of someone's AWS environment, and the reasons for that are There's a number of reasons. One is they might be having some type of major funding event happening. Like they're getting a new round of funding or something, and the investors like want there to be like someone to check things over before, like they actually sign that check over to them and stuff. So like that's kind of like one of the things is just, basically someone to look over what's happened. Sometimes it'll be, the head of security, he might be new, or he might have recently found out about a business unit that is using AWS in some way, and just doesn't have wants an understanding of what those environments are. And so they're not only interested in getting like a security checkup on it, to like see what's happening there, but they also just want to find out like how big is that environment, like what all do they have going on in there? Is it just like a couple EC2s, or is it like thousands? Like they just they're either new or they just have no insight into that. So that's going to be one of the reasons. Another reason is sometimes it is just they want someone to just double check their work. They're trying to secure things, but they're like I said, when I was in charge of security, like they're running all these different things. They have like an AppSec program where they're checking the code. They have, incident response and things for dealing with, the corporate laptops and stuff like that. They're dealing with all these other things. And so they just want someone that, has expertise on AWS to just come in there and look at things. And so in terms of like what I do when I actually go into their environment is for an assessment, what I'll do is I'll get basically read-only access. So I can't change anything in their environment. I can't break anything in their environment. And the privileges that are granted in that is like usually I'll just ask for the security audit privileges. But basically what this means is like I can't see the data that exists, so I can see the metadata about things. I can see that there is an S3 bucket and what the policies are on that S3 bucket, but I can't actually see the data that's in, that S3 bucket. And so, that again, like if anything were, if my laptop were compromised or anything like that, like I don't have a copy of any of their data, any of their business data. So for them, it's relatively risk-free for me to be doing that type of assessment, because you can think of like different pen tests and things that people have. Sometimes you give people like full access to a server, to a production server, and they're like, can you hop around from this server to something else? But like just giving them access to that server, like is a scary thing, that you've given them access to a production server or something like that. So anyways, for what I'm doing, it's relatively low risk for them. And so then what I do is I'm looking for, some of the standard things that some of the other tools out there will look for. And so this will be things like, S3 buckets that are public to the world, and some of the like, and I can usually expect in a lot of environments, that there's probably going to be like one S3 bucket that might be exposed depending on like how many accounts I'm looking at and how big these accounts are and stuff like that. And it might just be an S3 bucket that like a developer, like especially as a developer AWS account where they're just doing random things. And so it might be just an S3 bucket that has like a single hello world, like text file, and it's nothing really scary. And then also depending on how old the account is, I'll probably find like that there are access keys that exist in that environment, which is basically like your credentials, your username and password is kind of the concept there. And I'll probably find some that are at least a year old that have never been used in a year. And so here are, some creds that just need to be removed, like they haven't been used in a year. Someone probably lost them. Maybe they're on GitHub somewhere, but they're probably just, like they never wrote them down and they're just not used at all. So like things like that. And so those are things that a lot of the existing tools out there will find. But then recently I've added like a ton of functionality to Cloud Mapper to basically look for a whole bunch of other things as well. And so these will be things that are kind of like odd configurations that are probably misconfigurations. And so an example of this would be someone setting the CIDR for a security group, meaning like usually you'd have an IP address or something like that you're allowing into this firewall. And so usually it would be like a /32, meaning like this specific IP address. But sometimes people will make a mistake when they type that in and it'll be like a /3. and so they're accidentally letting in like the whole internet, or a large part of it. So you'll find things like that, or you might find a security group that is letting in, to some port, it is letting in access to a /32, and then it's additionally the next line is letting in access to 0.0.0/0. And so it's like at some point someone tried to limit this access, but then they ended up just deciding that whatever, they couldn't get it to work, and they just opened it up to everybody. And so you'll be able to find things like that. Or I have also, it allows me to see privilege escalation abilities. So with IAM policies, which is going to be like how you grant privileges to people, you can try and limit those privileges, but depending on what you granted them access to, you might end up accidentally granting them access to change privileges that people have, and with that they can then change their own privileges, and now they can become admin in the account. And so you can spot those types of things. But then along with that, I'm also giving people kind of an inventory of things. And so I can tell them hey, here are all the admins in your accounts, here's statistics on all the different services that you're using. So I can provide that. I also have, when I look at the security groups for any /32s or any security groups in there, I also tell them I do GeoIP lookups on that. So I can say hey, you have trusted access coming in from San Francisco and New York City, and maybe some random one in India or something like that. And so I'll be just want to let you know, maybe you have some type of third party contract or something in India, but this is potentially an odd thing that maybe you'll shut down, or maybe some guy was on vacation in Florida one time, and so we opened up access to his hotel down there, and so it's you should just close that off now. So yeah, so it's a lot of just just kind of double checking through things, just looking for things that kind of appear odd. A common thing that I'll find is CloudFormation scripts, which is what's allowing you to have infrastructure as code, where you can basically define what EC2s you want to have exist, and be able to pass in some parameters to those. And very frequently there's hard-coded passwords and stuff like that in there. And so again, you're able to look at that and say, hey, there's some hard-coded passwords. You should, store these in a smarter way, and you should roll those, because whoever had access to those CloudFormation scripts now has access to, your production server passwords and stuff. So
that's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask. Yeah, I know. I'm just throwing a bunch of questions at Scott. So when you go in to look at these environments, a couple questions. One, how often are they actually turning on any of the monitoring services that AWS offers? That's probably my first question.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple services that AWS provides by default, or has services that you can turn on. And so these include Trusted Advisor, which will tell you if you have S3 buckets that are publicly exposed. And as far, I don't think people are using that very much, just because the information that's providing, a lot of people don't have a good way of getting that into their SIMs or something like that. And so there's going to be that service. There's GuardDuty is a newer one. And what GuardDuty does is it allows you to actually identify whether or not your access keys are being used from a Tor node or something like that, or if your EC2s are calling out to crypto mining DNS names. So it's able to kind of check some of those things. And GuardDuty is $5 per month per account per region. It's kind of confusing how it all works, but it's basically pretty cheap, and they have some additional costs and fees depending on how much your account is actually being used. And since GuardDuty is relatively new, it hasn't been turned on in very many accounts. You also have the horrible kind of restriction that with security audit privileges that I mentioned previously, the security audit privileges do not allow you to see whether or not GuardDuty is turned on. And so that, so I recently put up a blog post basically saying AWS's IAM managed policies, which security audit is one of those policies, is not a best practice. Using those things is almost never the right choice. Just AWS is not updating those policies. They either granted way too many permissions or not enough. For example, if if you just want to give someone access to like a single S3 bucket and you're using one of those managed policies, like the policies don't restrict to a specific resource. So it's just going to give you access to all S3 buckets as opposed to just the one you need. So yeah, so they're always either not giving you enough access or they're giving you too much access. So I'm not asking clients anymore to give me security audit privileges. I'm giving, like initially it just made sense because it was easier. Like they didn't have to, you know, double check anything. But now I just decided like it's too much of a hassle because it doesn't give me the accesses that I actually need and want. So let me just give you like, here's the specific permissions that I want in your account.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I was thinking, because you brought up some good points about, like, you brought up the fact that, you know, there's guard duty and trusted advisor. You know, honestly, I was wondering much more at a much more basic level, like, do they have their CloudTrail logging enabled? Do they have any config or CloudWatch alerts? You know, is basically like, even at the very most like fundamental levels, are they, or is anyone, or what's, you know, I don't know what the percentage, if you could even ballpark, but what are you?
That fits. Yeah, and that fits right into it. Actually, Jimmy Mesta asked a question, Ken. He wondered what the top 3 highest impact changes were that somebody can make in their AWS environment. So it kind of feeds into that, right? You know, what is it that you're seeing in the environments, right? Like, and, you know, what is it that somebody that's stepping into that role or advising a customer or a, you know, internal team, hey, these are the 3 things that I need you to do today versus, hey, these are the nice to haves.
Yeah. So let me start off with the CloudTrail issue. It depends on why I'm being like called in to do the assessment. Because sometimes like the person will turn it on like a few days before like I start doing the assessment, because it's someone that, you know, suddenly is like, we need to focus on AWS security. Let me like try and figure this stuff out. And that's like one of the first things they do is like turn that on. But it's also important to know that turning on CloudTrail, and definitely do it. Like, I don't want to say like don't do it, but it's no longer as important to turn it on, because nowadays CloudTrail, it automatically is recording the previous 90 days. And so that's on by default in every account. It's not giving you like some of the finer grained details, but it is giving you a lot of that information. So which is awesome. Like AWS now does that by default. So you always have 90 days and it can't be turned off. Even if someone tries to disable it or anything like that, that's always going to be there for you. And so I think it has like a slightly different name, like CloudTrail Event History, but you'll be able to find it if you look inside the CloudTrail part of the AWS console. But in terms of like things that they can do to I guess basically like take control of their accounts, you know, or try and secure them and lock them down, I think one is going to be guard duty. It has its warts, you know, like people that know guard duty pretty well know there are a number of ways to get around it. You know, if you want to bypass it like any other tool, like antivirus or anything like that, like there are clearly obvious ways kind of to be able to do things in an account and not have guard duty detect those things. But it is like super useful, and at like $5 per month, like you should turn it on. Like it's crazy not to turn it on, especially, you know, like how much, you know, other security tools out there potentially cost for you. So using guard duty. The other big thing is using some type of SSO provider. So like using Okta or something like that, as opposed to making IAM users in your account. And so the big benefit behind that is, especially as you get more AWS accounts, if someone leaves your company or, you know, their laptops gets compromised and you want to roll their passwords or something like that, you know, you want to be able to roll their passwords in every AWS account that they have. And so it becomes much more difficult if you're using IAM users versus if you're using just a single identity provider like that. So that's going to be like your other big thing. And then probably the third one is make sure that you're like pushing these logs and being able to generate alerts with some type of SIM system. So like Airbnb, they have a tool called Stream Alert, which is open source. And so this thing is awesome. It has a lot of the functionality built in automatically, which will automatically alert you whenever like guard duty alerts go off, or like trusted advisor identifies things. Like it has all that built in, so it can check those things, in addition to things like being able to identify if S3 buckets get publicly exposed and stuff like that. So those would be probably like the top 3 things that I would look at. But I'll add in like a fourth would be to, there's some various tools out there that allow you to see like all of the IP addresses or domains that are publicly exposed for your accounts. And so just understanding like what is it that you actually have public out there. And so again, Cloud Mapper has that ability. It has a command in it that'll tell you, here are all the different EC2s or load balancers and stuff like that are publicly accessible from the internet, and here are the port numbers on them. So then you can go ahead and you can Nmap scan them, or you can use some type of tool in order to get screenshots if it's a web service that's being able to display these, a web service like an HTTP server or something like that behind that's public.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think, it probably just depends on the organization, like how like mature they're going to be. Definitely. I don't know. I'm a little surprised at the kind of the parallels that go along with what you're doing. And then when we were talking to like Jimmy about the Kubernetes environments and the way that those are set up as well, right? Something like a third party, IAM or identity provider, because the tools that are baked into those solutions aren't necessarily as robust, or, you have the problem just like you said. So I am struck a little bit that, there are similarities between the two, but obviously the underlying platform is pretty dissimilar when it really comes down to it. Let's see, what else was I going to ask? Specifically, he also asked something about incident response. Mm-hmm. Do you get involved in those engagements as well, like within AWS?
I haven't. I've only had one client reach out to me for an incident response issue, and that was basically for one of their accounts. Suddenly the cost of it spiked, and they realized there was some crypto mining that happened in that account. And so they wanted me to review CloudTrail logs to basically try and understand what had happened there. And so, spend a few hours just to be able to say like, hey, looks like your access keys got exposed on like GitHub or something, and an automated script just went in and spun up EC2 instances. And they didn't do anything else. They didn't like try and read any of their S3 buckets or touch any of their data there. All they did was spin up EC2 instances to mine Bitcoin or some type of cryptocurrency. And so that's been the only one that I've been involved in. But I do want to do a lot more of that, especially like nowadays. I'm pretty good at using AWS Athena, which is the service that allows you to query S3 buckets. And so my Cloud Tracker tool now actually uses Athena behind the scenes. So previously, when you use Cloud Tracker, you had to load all of your data into Elasticsearch, which was like a super huge pain, especially like for me coming into engagements, because like I'm on engagement for 1 week and I have to spend like the first 3 days loading data into like an Elasticsearch instance, and then trying to like look through it as quickly as possible and write a report about it. So now it uses Athena, and so Athena just queries S3 buckets directly. And so also for incident response, that's going to be like hugely useful, because instead of having to download all of the CloudTrail logs and then try and like unzip them and parse them and stuff like that, now it can just run queries directly against them. So that I hope to be able to do more of in the future. In a few months, I'll be giving like a talk at a conference that's related to doing incident response like that as well. So
that's actually a good part, or a good segue into one of the questions we typically ask is, are there any places you might be at conference-wise, attending or otherwise in the upcoming, like, we'll say 6 months, that people might be able to stop and chat with you?
Yeah, I mean, I will be in San Francisco in like another 2 months for a conference out there, but it hasn't been like announced yet or anything. So I don't want to, I guess, go into too many more details on that. And then, yeah, for right now, I do have some more speaking engagements, but they've not been publicly announced yet, unfortunately.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, we always ask if people want to chat more with you. I mean, I know that and actually, let me make sure we put your Twitter handle inside the description of this video, but if people want to reach out to you via Twitter, we got some thanks on your you answering all these questions as well. Cool. So it is appreciated. Yeah, Seth, I'm trying to think because we're about to hit that hour point. So, Seth, anything to add? Any questions before we?
No, I was going to say, Scott is local to me. So anybody that's here in the Utah, the greater Salt Lake City area, I watch for both of us at DC 801 meetups or 801 labs. I know. I mean, some guys get down further south. Like some of the OWASP or the Utah, I can't remember, Utah Sec meetups that happen down in, Thanksgiving Point area. But I don't, personally, I don't get to those as often as I would like to, just, personal things, or come on here or hit us up on Twitter. Right. How do you actually pronounce your Twitter handle there, Scott? I started looking at it and I was like 0x. Yeah.
It's Dabadoo. Yeah, Dabadoo. So it's written in hex. It's like one of the few words that's like written in hex that wasn't already taken by everybody else, like dead beef and it's like cafe babe and stuff like that. So yeah, Dabadoo is how it's pronounced.
Dabadoo. Got it. Okay, that makes more sense.
And Scott's company is Summit Route or you can go to his website summitroute.com.
Yep. Or just check out flaws.cloud. Right, we've posted that too. And that's got links to Summit Route as well. Yep.
Awesome. Are you going to be at DEF CON at all?
I won't, unfortunately. I'm getting a puppy this weekend, so
right.
Make it out there. Yep.
We talked about that. Yeah. Well, congrats on the new puppy.
Thank you.
And congrats to you, Seth, on releasing Hacker Tracker.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say something about it. That's the DEF CON. Well, I do the iOS version of Hacker Tracker. It's the DEF CON scheduling application. It's got the whole schedule on there. Now I'm furiously gathering events that are going on that week. I mean, we got crazy numbers. I'm going to have to start like figuring out different ways to slice and dice the events just because there's so much going on at DEF CON, right? There's the official tracks, which are pretty easy to, parse through. But now you've got all of these different villages. And it looks like there's a list of like 20 of them, and they all have, 10 to 15 talks at least that are going on outside of the contests and events and everything else that's happening. So it should be a useful tool. I mean, I'll end up using it, which was the whole point of me building it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the same thing with Scott's tools. He built it because he needed it and used it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. I was going to say, Scott, like I've played with Flaws.cloud. I don't think I've been through the whole thing yet, right? But it's been super useful as far as like, oh, that's right. Yep. We can just do an NS lookup there, and that tells us where, everything's pointed at. And I mean, for people that need an introduction to cloud security, it seems to be pretty. It's a great tool. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, outside of that, right? Like from a development perspective, or someone getting into AWS, outside of the tools that we talked about specifically for the AWS environments, what recommendations do you have for someone that is completely new to that space?
I mean, I do recommend getting like one of the certificates at least, just because it's a forcing function to like force yourself to learn these things. And at the end of the day, like now you have this certificate, to kind of like prove to yourself at least like you kind of know a little bit about it. So doing that and the best way or the way that a lot of people do it is one, there's like, you'll read through some of the white papers that AWS has, so it'll force you to read those. And then A Cloud Guru is the maker of some AWS videos that help you like on those certifications. So that's what a lot of people will use is purchase that in order to see those videos. And they do a good job of helping you out with those things. But other than that, I mean, like, actually just get a free tier account with AWS. So when you sign up for an account, you have the first year free, as long as like you're not doing too many crazy things. Like you are going to be limited to like a single EC2 instance, and it's going to be the smallest instance, but like you can play around with it for free and not, have to spend very much money or, any money at all. And like really get your feet wet and actually trying to like do some things and understand those. Again, like I'm partial to using Cloud Mapper, but like Cloud Mapper has a tool has a command in it called collect, and that will actually download like JSON files of all the metadata about your account. So I think that's really helpful when you're trying to understand like AWS, to be able to see like what does all this information look like, especially if you start up your own account and then run Cloud Mapper collect against it, and then create an EC2 instance or something like that, and then run Cloud Mapper collect again, and then do a diff between those two, and you'll be able to see like what does the actual metadata behind the scenes look like for how the account actually looks. So I would recommend doing that. And when you start using AWS, I think the most important thing is to turn on billing alerts for yourself at like $1, $5, $10. And these will send you an email if you end up like, if any charges, I think it's estimated charges, but it might be like incurred charges, just so you don't end up with like, a bill that's outside your abilities to pay, so you don't end up with like $1,000 bill or something like that for the month. So I think that's also important to do. Make sure you turn on billing alerts.
Yeah. So don't put your AWS keys in GitHub. Yep. Turn on billing alerts. I mean, unless you want to help out the crypto miners, because you want to pay for them. Yeah. I mean, people, Ken and I talk about that all the time. Like people like dropping secrets into GitHub or, their Git repositories. And, I can't tell you how many root accounts that I found, just from small companies where it's only like one or two guys. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it might be private, okay, so it's not too bad, but on the same hand, like, all it is one flag that's protecting you from just complete and utter, probably company going under, because I know they can't afford a $50,000 AWS bill one month. They just cannot do it. So yeah. So make sure that your source code doesn't include your AWS keys or your AWS keys. Outside of that, I mean, those are really good suggestions as far as what someone can do. I would suggest that they hit you up on Twitter, right? Yeah. If that's kind of your preferred mode.
Definitely.
We always like to hook up people to be like mentors and mentees, right? If that's your interest and that's the space that you want to be in, let's start there.
Yeah. They can also, it's scott@summerroute.com is my email address. So they want to do it privately. I have DMs open though as well on Twitter. They want to send me one there.
Cool. Good. Outside of that, Ken and I are still like, we're doing our Seth and Ken's Excellent Adventures in Code Review at AppSec USA in October. So if anyone's interested there, I believe the registration is open for that. And then also AppSec Day in Melbourne the week after AppSec USA. So
I think I just saw a little bit of anxiety in your eyes when you said that.
The week after, yeah. I'm just trying to figure out the travel, getting from one to the other. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do 2 back-to-back cross countries. So,
well, I mean, that sounds like a personal problem. I'm going to say it. So, cool. Anything else, Ken, that you've got on your docket?
No, I was going to just leave it up to Scott to see if he wanted to, leave the listeners, leave folks with any remaining thoughts, and say goodnight.
Yeah. Let's see. Right now, I mean, mostly I'm just working on Cloud Mapper and Cloud Tracker more. So like, look for continuous updates on those. I've been promising people for a while I'd make a flaws too. That's more like focused on incident response and more focused on like actual blue teams, because although it was originally made for my DevOps guys to learn, I think the people who have gotten the most value out of it are like pen testers and bug bounty hunters and things like that. And so I want to make one that is more on like how to actually audit your own account, how to respond to incidents in AWS, things like that. And so I hope to put out a flaws too. I keep promising it. Eventually it's going to happen. So those would be the next things. And again, like I said, I do AWS security work. So if you have any needs, I do things beyond just the assessments, whether it's like building these tools like Cloud Mapper and Cloud Tracker, or helping people to actually, whether it's planning things or being able to better leverage some of the AWS security features like KMS and Cloud HSM and things like that. Those are also things that I'm capable of, those are like the kind of key management solutions of AWS. So I'm available to help with those things as well.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on. I know listeners appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and sharing your experience and answering a lot of questions. I know you got bombarded with questions. So, yeah, just thank you, I guess, is what I'd like to say.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll get you out some stickers or some pins or something, right?
Awesome.
At least drop them by, or I can even just put them in the mail. It'll be quick here. So, yeah,
I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I did want to say anybody who wants swag, send it to absoluteappsec@gmail.com. So absoluteappsec@gmail.com. Send your name, physical address, and just something in the subject line like "Give me free stuff." I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, you do have to dox yourself because it is like kind of a meat space thing, a sticker, right? Or you can find us at DEF CON, right? If you want to go that route, but then you actually have to interact with us too. So I mean, it's it's kind of up to you. Either way, we're going to see who you are. We may not know your name in one situation, but we do in the other, and we don't. Yeah, your choice, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that because GitHub, we're doing this thing with HackerOne where we're going to have because they're doing it each night with a few different companies. I won't mention the other companies, but GitHub's one of them, and we're going to have 100 hackers come in, and they're basically going to that night get paid out where we'll triage. So we're going to be there from early afternoon till early in the morning, just triaging whatever they might find on our the scope that we're giving them. And so it's actually really fun. But point being, I'll be I think I'm going to be pretty tired there at DEF CON. So it should be interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, you should come do some other stuff too, but I guess you can go work. That's cool.
Yeah. No, I'm actually excited to see what these researchers find. These are some really good researchers. So it should be really fun to meet and to meet in person. You get these bug bounty submissions and you don't necessarily get to you're talking over email, and it's always nice. Just like Scott, we've talked over email before, but we never got to really interact like this. So this is why I love this podcast. Yep. I think this is why both Seth and I love doing this podcast. We just meet, talk to people, ask them questions.
Yeah. Yep. Well, good. Thanks, Scott, for coming on. We're pushing over an hour now, but and let us know if there's anything else. We'll send you any other additional questions that we get. Otherwise, we'll catch you, here locally or online. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Don't hang up just yet, guys. But for the rest of everyone else, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.